going to invest in uranium. We are not going to invest in nat gas. We are not going to invest in shipping capacity. We are not investing in commodity businesses because those are the types of businesses that you cannot hold for a long term. Commodities always get back to some sort of marginal cost of production, no matter what people say, no matter what pundits tell you, no matter what macro hedge funds tell you. They love this kind of stuff. We don't like it. It's not that it's a bad investment, but it is not part of our principal stack. This is the Not Even Wrong podcast. It's October 15, 2021. This is Cryptelco. For the day, the fund is up 1.1%. The market's up 65 basis points. For the year, we're up 15.7%. The market's up 18%. We're underperforming by 2.3%. So recently, we spoke about the potential to invest in uranium and nat gas. The reason is because we believe that the electrification of transport is going to take a lot more electricity than we have today. And those are the types of commodities that are necessary to make this happen. We also had similar conversations before about cobalt and lithium because they were necessary to electrify transportation for the batteries. So we decided not to invest in any of those businesses. And I want to discuss why, because this is not necessarily a bad investment. Don't get me wrong. People like Hugh Henry go around, talk about uranium, and he was right for this year. Uranium's up. Cameco, one of the flagship stocks, is up, I believe, 60-70% or even doubled this year. So those are certainly good investments. But here's why it doesn't fit into Orange Capital Partners. And I think this is very important. The purpose of this podcast is to give people a sense of what it feels like to run a hedge fund. And we've said on many occasions that the way we work is we set a set of principles that we call the principle stack, on which we then build sort of processes, and then we decide, okay, should we invest or not? In the end, we're in the business of what should I do next? Should I buy? Should I sell? I said also many times that our degree of freedom is really just to buy. Once we have the right stock, we don't sell. Selling is always a bad proposition, no matter what. And the only reason we sell is because we're also humans. We have bills to pay, all that stuff. So we need to sell sometimes. Hopefully we don't. Hopefully we can manage the fund in a way that we can always just keep investing, or at least keep our stocks the way they are. Now, the reason we say that is because we invest in companies that are building innovation stacks. Innovation stacks are businesses that are built on solving problems and that are sort of an accumulation of problem solving. And the problems that are solved today are sort of not linear, but they're a derivative of problems that were solved way back. And that's why these businesses are very unique, because the innovation stack, by definition, is something, it's your path, it's your company's path. So if you're a Tesla, you've solved the problem of batteries, AI, electrification, solar, all these problems that Tesla is solving in a very unique way. And it's very difficult to compete with a company like that. Jim McKelvey, in his book, The Innovation Stack, talks about how Amazon wasn't able to compete with Square on the payment side because of that particular reason. Amazon has all the resources in the world, but they don't have the history, they don't have the knowledge and the problem-solving capabilities that led to an end product that then they try to compete with. The same applies to Tesla now, and GM or Ford or Volkswagen. No matter how much resources they throw in there, they cannot stop Tesla. Of course, they're trying it now on the political front. That's a different conversation, and I don't want to go into that right now. So the point here is that we are not interested in investing in commodities because they exactly lack that type of thing. Commodities are not innovation stack businesses. Commodities are not disruptive. Commodities are not in the business of lowering the cost of iteration in order to solve problems, create new problems, solve those problems, create new, better problems, solve those problems. Commodities are kind of old-fashioned businesses. On our website, we have a section where we talk about the history of investing, hopefully in a little bit of a lighter, funny way, but it gets to the point where we start with the caveman. We define investing as keeping resources for the future. So investing can only happen when you have savings. And savings is something you have because you're not using it today. So the caveman was saving some protein for future consumption, and it was all about survival and those sort of things. And then we said, Well, we got out of that, fortunately, and we got to the sort of, I would say, 1930s onwards type of investment culture, which was epitomized by Warren Buffett, which is the predatory business, which today, for example, also Masayoshi Son is trying to implement into the technology space with Uber and DoorDash and all these companies, where you dominate the market, you become a monopolist by basically owning all the territory, putting all your flags, every possible position, and then once you own the market, you just start reaping benefits, you reap rents out of this particular market. So dominate the market and then charge people. It's almost like a kind of a Cournot monopoly point kind of place where you don't overcharge, of course, you don't want to kill your goose, but you keep investing enough to keep the territory safe. You don't necessarily innovate, actually you fall into incrementalism. That's a typical Warren Buffett company, would be an incrementalism company. Even Apple is now going towards that type of company where the incremental improvements are visible and they're nice and people like it, but in the end there's no disruption, no innovation. There is no 10 times better, 10 times less expensive type of thing happening anymore. Coca-Cola, Geico, these types of companies that Buffett is famous for investing are all those types of companies. They're good companies, they're decent investments, all these things are fine, but they're not the types of companies that we invest in. What we said what we say on the website and what I'm saying here is we want to do sort of the next level, and that's regenerative growth, which is growth that uses as much or even less resources to grow. So in other words, the product by being used generates more resources. This is the ultimate goal. We're not there 100%, but for example, Tesla is trying to move the transportation sector away from fossil fuels to sun, and at least for a pretty long period of time, if we can do that, we would at least have a net zero consumption of resources, just because we have so much resources through the sun that it wouldn't even matter with the type of energy we would be using. Hopefully in the future, and this is more on the SynBio side, we can actually create companies that are even creating resources while we're consuming the product. So in other words, for example, we have a product that through the usage of the product creates new resources. This is something that is part of the regenerative medicine, regenerative growth theory. So for example, we use clothing, and by using the clothing, we generate a resource that can be used for something else, something along those lines. This is the future. We're not there yet, but this is the goal. And in order to achieve those types of this type of goal, we need to have innovation stacks. We need to have disruption. We need to have problem solving, because these are problems that aren't solved yet. So by definition, we have to solve those problems. And in order to accelerate that, we assume that it can only happen through a sort of Popperian, David Deutschian type of solving problems, creating new problems, solving problems type of way. And this is what we call an innovation stack. So we're only interested in those types of companies because they generate enormous amounts of returns, and we also hope that it's a good thing to do. Now, good is in the eye of the beholder. Observations are theory laden, so we're not illusionary about that. We don't have an absolute claim on goodness, but for us, within the context of what we do, this seems to be the right thing to do, and therefore we're also we're mentioning that on the website, that we think that the old model of making money in the financial markets and then distributing it through charities or taxes or things like that is not the right model. The best model is to actually invest money in businesses that through their operation already do good things. For example, Tesla is such a company, and our SynBio index mostly is in that space, because of course if they can, for example, lower the cost of healthcare by 10 or 100x or even more orders of magnitude, that would be an enormous service to society. So to summarize, the reason we don't invest in commodities such as uranium or nat gas, and I mentioned also container capacity, because those are the kinds of things that people are talking about right now. Why are people investing in these things? Because there's shortages. And it's perfectly fine to invest in those shortages. And this is part of the function of financial markets, which is you have to allocate capital to places where there is a need for investment. So you go and invest there. The problem with that for us is, again, it doesn't fit into our principle stack. It's not a bad thing. We're not frowning upon it or anything like that. Actually, it's the function of financial markets to do that. You want people to invest more in container capacity, in port capacity, and all those things because there is a shortage right now. However, we believe that over the long term, these shortages will sort themselves out, that the returns, the excess returns will go away because of the commoditization of the business, because of the non-defensibility of the business model, and all these other things that commodities inherently come with. I think there's a certain romantic love of the investment community with this type of commoditized business, copper, oil, nat gas, container capacity, because it's tangible. It's sort of how the investment community actually started. If you go back 200 years, that was all there was. There was publicly listed companies were typically companies in the commodity business. So there is a culture of centuries of investing in publicly listed commodity businesses. So there is, I would say, a romantic association with these types of businesses. What we're doing is very new. It's uncomfortable because it's very difficult to predict what future knowledge will produce, what kind of problems it will create, and therefore what kind of solutions. However, we believe that, again, like we said in one of the recent podcasts, the one thing we look at is actually less the results and much more the process of lowering the cost of iteration. This is the key that we look at Orange Capital Partners. So if a company spends a lot of resources in lowering costs of iteration so they can start solving problems faster and cheaper, that is something that gives us comfort. If it happens to be in a space that has a big market, then it's even better. So the returns are even higher because we need returns to keep reinvesting and solving those problems. Without capital, without wealth, those problems cannot be solved. Thank you.